All right, picking up on that first page where we left off. So how do we get these different forms of alleles? How do some people have the allele to be quiet? How do some people have the allele to be loud? That's all caused by mutations. And mutations are changes in DNA. Okay, so these mutations are what produces alleles or the differences in your DNA. So if you remember back when we did the rock pocket mouse, most of the mice had tan fur, and then there was a random mutation that happened in the coding for the gene that gives them their fur color, and that mutation caused a baby mouse to be born with black fur. So that just randomly happens, but that's how we get all of the different alleles for hair color, eye color, blah, blah, blah. And of course, we inherit those then from our parents. When we talk about alleles, remember we're going to talk about dominant alleles, and we represent those with a capital letter. And then we talk about recessive alleles, and those we represent with a lowercase letter. So dominant is always going to take over. So if, quiet is dominant to a person that's loud, which doesn't really make sense, that's represented with that capital Q. Now they can be homozygous dominant, or they could be heterozygous for quietness. Both of these would make that person quiet, because what happens is that dominant allele always masks the recessive. It just kind of takes over. The only way that someone is going to be quiet then is if they get that recessive, homozygous recessive alleles with two little Q's. Then that is what would produce, say, a quiet person. All right, flipping to the back side, we talk about Mendel's laws, and this is Gregor Mendel, that is known as the father of genetics, and his laws basically described how traits are passed down, and he did this by studying pea plants. So here he describes how traits or alleles are passed from a parent to the offspring. And if you remember in class, the parents are always starting off in that pea generation up top. So we had a purple pea plant and a white one. And then their offspring is what we would call the filial generation. And that is the offspring from the parents. And then if we mated again and produced offspring, that would be the F2 generation. So when Mendel came up with all these laws, there was two things that he really noticed. The first one is the law of segregation, and what this says is that two alleles are going to be separated. And this happens in meiosis, which we will study in the next chapter. But what this allowed him to do is predict how a single gene would be inherited. So this predicts how a single gene is inherited. And this is where we use those Punnett squares. So when we're talking about a single gene, it could be that gene for quietness. Well, maybe the dad is homozygous dominant and the mom would be heterozygous. Well, when we put those into the squares, I should have done this bigger. Okay, Q, 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 Q. What happens is this Q up top and this Q on the left side, they are going to intersect right in this box and come together. And then we go across, the two big Q's come together. Then down below, you're going to get that big Q from up top, and then this Q here. You always write the big Q first. And then in the second box on the bottom, you would get that. So really, this is just showing how the gene for quietness can be inherited. He also talks about law of independent assortment. And what this one is saying is that one gene moves independently from all the others. So basically what this is saying is that if you get a gene for tallness, that doesn't mean that you automatically get a gene for brown eyes. So each gene is inherited separately. So one is not determined by the other. Okay, let's wrap up here. I'm going to, I think, move this down. So it's not always so black and white as what we've been making it out to be. So in terms of, dominance, recessiveness, there's a few other things that we need to discuss. So if we're looking at flowers and we're saying that purple is dominant to white, all that's saying is that the dominant capital letter represents purple. If you have the recessive small letter, that's going to give you white. So far we've been talking about complete dominance, where when you have big P, if that's dominant, that's going to give you purple. If you have big P, lowercase p, that's going to give you also purple. Okay, so it's a complete dominance over that recessive allele. The only way you would get white is to have two lowercase p's, and that would give you a white flower. Okay, so that's what we've looked at so far. The other one is incomplete dominance. And so that's saying that obviously your big P gives you purple. But if you have a heterozygous, a big or a capital and a lowercase, that's going to give you lavender. Okay, so something kind of in the middle, whereas the lowercase is still going to give you white. Okay, and then thirdly, we call this codominance, and co just means that you're seeing both at the same time. So capital still gives you purple. If you have big, small, the heterozygous, that's actually not going to give you lavender or purple anymore. That's going to give you purple and white stripes. White striped. So both are equally represented, and you're going to see both phenotypes being expressed at the same time. And then, of course, lowercase would still give you white. Okay? So these are pretty simple things if we were to look at genetics like that. Unfortunately, there's so many other things that can influence what happens to people. So sometimes we want to say that, everything's caused by a gene, but you have to understand that your environment can cause changes. If I'm constantly exposed to radiation or to radon gases coming out of the ground that are radioactive, I might end up with cancer. So then at that point, how can I say my cancer was due to the genes? Maybe it was my diet, radiation exposure, because I like to lay in a tanning bed, I have radon coming out of my earth, and I eat processed foods all day long. Same thing with obesity. Yes, there is a genetic link to it, but if you're somebody that's eating fast food every night for dinner, you can't always blame it on your genes. Same with cholesterol. Intelligence. Do certain people have the genes that they inherited from their parents to be a little bit more academically gifted? Definitely. But, are you raised in an environment that really stresses that you do your homework and, there's a bunch of different things around you that encourage that? You're going to have a higher intelligence. Same thing with athleticism. Okay. Yes, it may be some genetic link there. Oftentimes you don't get the gene from an athletic parent. Maybe you work your tail off in the gym every day to become better. It wasn't naturally given to you So then we would have to look at athleticism a little bit different. Okay, that's the end of chapter 7.